Great. We are beginning our program for the rest of the morning. And yesterday we had a great opportunity to listen by video to Steve Kennard. And really, the whole story about Africa, of course, is the story of many ministers, many people serving, many disciples just in their faithfulness, helping to build up the ministries. And so we have a very special segment about building up the church and hearing the African story. And what's exciting about this as well is we have one live African with us. And Paul gets the prize absolutely for being the most persevering and paying the greatest price to actually be at the conference, having arrived a whole week early just to go through all the tests and be tested and tested yet again to prove what he already believed, that he was healthy and sound. But he was willing to go all through that for our benefit, and I'm very, very grateful. We're going to begin this segment about the African story with a video from Emmanuel Emeh from Lagos, Nigeria. And he's actually the chairman of the teachers group in Africa, and just a very enthusiastic, zealous brother who loves the Word of God. And really, we are just so grateful that he's been able to make this this presentation for us. Do we have the intro video? Okay, so right before we have his video, we're going to key up a short introduction that Steve Kennard has done about these two brothers. So that saves me from just bragging on guys I don't know about but think are awesome. To have really someone who knows them deeply and thinks they're awesome and share about them. So first we'll have Steve Kennard's introduction of our two speakers this morning.
It's my great privilege to be able to share with you two speakers and introduce to you two speakers from Africa. The first is Emmanuel Emeh. Emmanuel is an evangelist and a teacher in West Africa, specifically in Lagos. Emmanuel I really love Emmanuel. He's such a good friend. But I appreciate Emmanuel's boundless energy. He just is so charged all the time. He has been a student of mine, both in the MTA program in Africa, as well as in the Rocky Mountain School, where he graduated with a master's degree at the Rocky Mountain School of Ministry and Theology. And it was such a joy and a pleasure to have him in class. Also a pleasure to help train him and recognize him as a teacher. But Emmanuel is currently pursuing doctoral studies in Indiana, at a seminary there, and apologetics and culture. Emmanuel is the real deal. I mean, he's a teacher through and through. And so he's the chair of the African Teachers Group. To me, that's a perfect selection that they made. I had nothing to do with it because, as I said before, I stepped aside. But they made a great selection with Emmanuel. And then working alongside of Emmanuel in the African Teachers Group is Paul Smith. I've had Paul as a student as well, both in Ministry Training Academy setting, also in the Rocky Mountain School of Ministry and Theology. Paul is a great student. And I really appreciate the work that Paul is doing, both with the African Teachers Group, is just one of the foundational people there, but also in the churches in Southern Africa. Paul is a person that can be relied upon there. And so I am happy to introduce to you Emmanuel and Paul. I know that they're going to share some great things. Please give them your full attention.
Good morning, brothers and sisters all over the world, and of course, especially there in Tallinn. My name is Emmanuel Emeh. I serve as teacher in the Lagos Church in Nigeria, and I'm also currently the chairman of the Africa Teachers Group. This morning, I believe it's a beautiful morning over there in Tallinn. It's definitely a beautiful time here in Lagos, Nigeria. Unfortunately, I can't be there with you guys in Tallinn, but thank God for the power of the internet and of course technology that we can do this across the world. Today I'm really excited that my dear brother and friend and partner in the gospel, Paul Smith, we are given this incredible privilege to come and share with all of you our story, even as we look at the bigger theme, teaching ministries are part of God's plan for building up the church. And here is our story from the African continent. Our story will definitely not be complete if we fail to acknowledge the incredible investment that have been made on us over the past few decades here on the continent of Africa. We have had several brothers come all the way from the United States and also other parts of the world to come and inspire us and teach us and give us this vision, for teaching ministry on the continent of Africa. Building up the church with the African story that we have, to share today is just the story of what we have experienced in the past, few years, 3 years that we began serving as teachers in Africa. Of course, our focus is on the humility, the unity, and the team functionality, that we have come to enjoy in the Africa teachers group, and we are very grateful for all that God has done. We have 15 teachers in Africa. Africa is a huge continent, and sub-Saharan Africa is divided in our church into East Africa, West Africa, and West Africa subdivided into two. We have the Anglophone West Africa, and of course the Francophone West Africa. Then we have in the middle the Central Africa, and at the base the Southern Africa. It's a huge continent of over 1.4 billion people, over 54 countries and counting, and just a dynamic, youth-based, society. So we began what we call the African Church Group just almost 2 years ago, and after the last appointments and in Southern Africa, so we got together and it was very organic. We just thought, hey, let's get together, let's get to know one another. We're on the same continent, let's get to share. And of course, because of the lockdown, we had Zoom to thank. So we began meeting regularly. And as we met, it became obvious that something great was happening. So we decided to couch, a terms of reference. Because when you come together, you have to know why you're coming together. So our brother, I believe, was Solomon, helped us to couch that terms of reference, and it began to now define what we're going to do. So let me just quickly introduce you all to our team. On the West Coast and Central Africa, we have 3 brothers from Nigeria, 2 from Ivory Coast, and 1 from from Congo, Kinshasa. And that's our dear brother Moses Kalala. And on the East Coast and Southern Africa, we have 4 brothers from Nairobi, Kenya, representing the Eastern African side, and we have 5 incredible brothers from the Southern Africa. As you can see, we have a very diverse group. That's one of the miracles. Our unity is based actually not on conformity, but on our diversity, and it's incredible. I mean, amongst us, we have people ranging from the baby boomers to Generation X and to the millennials. So you can see how widespread that we are. And believe it, also amongst us, we speak over 12 languages: Kiswahili, Hindi, German, Russian, French, English, Yoruba, Igbo, and it's an incredible group that we have. And we also have different personalities, of different. I mean, all as they come, we have all these personalities and a wide spectrum of professional background. We have people who have their background in pure sciences, who are research specialists. We have people who are social sciences. We have computer, analysts. We have engineers. We have we have several architects, artists, and even a former professional, full-time preacher, a full-time preacher in the denominational world, going around Africa, having crusades. But right now he became a disciple. And of course, you can see our colors are various. We have from all shades and sizes. We are from different tribes and ethnicity. Tribe is huge thing in Africa. And we have all this broad spectrum of tribe and ethnicity. We have various expertise and focus of the teachers. Some teachers are focusing on history, some are focusing on apologetics, some are doing family and marriage, some are doing all sorts. So it's just a wonderful thing that God has blessed us with. And amongst us, we have 8 of us are hired and paid by the church. We are all full-time disciples. 8 of us are hired and paid by the church, while 7 are tent makers. So it kind of brings a very interesting dynamic. So people are not doing it for money, they're doing it because they love God. And we can always call each other higher towards God. When we got together, we decided to say, okay, well, what are various individuals bringing in? And we said, okay, well, let's put together professional profile for all the teachers. That was the first project that we did. After we've formed and stormed, and we began to say, okay, let's see. And from that profile, it's amazing. What everybody is bringing in. It was very eye-opening. So I encourage you. You need to know your team. Even as we work together, we need to know our team. And one of the exciting things I find very encouraging amongst all of us, and more than half of us, we are converted from the campus ministry. That's very exciting, from us. So the next step is to navigate. We have to navigate the natural process of forming, storming, norming, and performing. So if you know team dynamic, we have to go through that. It's a huge temptation when we come together and want to start doing things. Avoid that temptation. We need to, have the ground rules set, get to know one another, get to know what people are bringing in. So that gave back to the ATG, the Africa Teachers Group. And from the ATG, we began to couch our terms of reference. And from our terms of reference, we began to appoint, regional heads, regional chairmen from every block in Africa: East Africa, Southern Africa, Central Africa, West English, and West French. So from those 5 brothers, we brought them together, and those are the brothers who now form the Africa Teachers Service Team, what we call the ATST. And this is like the working arm of the entire group. So we have several meetings. We have the ATST meetings, and we have the ATG meeting. And for every meeting that we have held, there's always jotting down of the minutes. We have some good scribes, who will write down the minutes of every meeting, that we hold. And any subsequent meeting, we have to read the minutes and to keep ourselves abreast of things that we say we're going to do and hold ourselves accountable. Of course, from there, we began to do some cross-border speaking invitation. And that really helped our unity. At the point, I've had all my people in my ministry, all members of my ministry, collaborate to have a joint Sunday service with brothers in East Africa. We've had people, come and speak, virtually, obviously, to us here. And I probably have hosted almost every teacher in Africa has come to speak in my ministry. I've gone to also speak in Central Africa, East Africa. Taught the Book of Revelation. We have brothers here also who are doing, and it's just pulling us together, and it's just incredible. What God has been doing. And of course, we now came up with these 3 joint projects. I'm going to be talking about one most especially. The first one I've discussed is the teacher's profile that showcase what each person was bringing to the table. The second one, in my opinion, was the most important project that we did, and that's the orientation, the teacher's orientation. And before we now publish our diary, teacher's orientation was facilitated by our dear brother, friend, mentor, Professor Kinad, and we got together 7 incredible topics. I mean, this seminar was stretched, and we probably took more than 5 hours. We were there for more than 5 hours, and we looked at various topics like the life and doctrine, the spiritual life of the teacher. And of course the pitfalls that teachers will have. We don't just want to be teachers who are recognized and we have these peaks on our shoulders, but we want to look at our life. The most important thing, for us, our life is always important. From there, we look at the need for teachers to teach. In fact, from there we adopted this slogan: teachers teach. We don't want to be teachers who are just boardroom teachers. We want to be teachers who are engaged, teaching publicly and privately also. They looked at taking a stand. What happens when a teacher goes rogue? What do we do? Sometimes we imagine that it will never happen, but it can happen. How do we prepare ourselves? How do we take a stand? And of course, look at different gifts. We're all coming in as teachers. We are bringing all kinds of things in. My strength might not be somebody's strength. Somebody's strength might not be my strength. But how do we harness all this great potential that God has given to us? And of course, from there, we talked about adding to our faith. Continuous education is something that we all committed ourselves to, that we're going to continue to grow in continuous education. We cannot stop learning. And of course, we talked about publishing, writing. How do we do peer review? And Dr. Kennard helped us out a lot in that. So by the end of 1 year, we looked at what we have done, and we said, let's document how far we have gone. And it was incredible. And that gave back to over 80 pages. An 80-page document or a magazine-style diary, that showcase the activity of not just individual teachers on the continent, but of course for all of us as a group. We began noticing, incredible things they are doing. The School of Mission in Abidjan, the School of Mission in Central Africa, the School of Mission is in Southern Africa, the School of Mission in West Africa. People were doing MTA programs. We looked at, one time, one of our teachers had to travel to go spend 3 months. To go be with a church that was going through some doctrinal issues, and it was very heartwarming to just see what God has done. So documenting our successes and our experiences is very, very key, so that we can always go back and see how much God has blessed us. And for those who are interested in taking a look at this magazine, it's there on Disciples today. There's a link to give you the e-copy, electronic copy of that magazine. So it's very colorful in African style, and we are truly grateful. Now, before I go, I want to share about some healthy collaborations that we also enjoy in our group. We had to initiate this tripartite leadership workshop that hopefully is going to be happening before the end of this year, where we believe that we need to work closely with elders, evangelists, and teachers. Is very, very important. We also set up an academic review committee headed by our dear brother Raj. So that we're good. As we write papers, we send to Raj. Raj is our tech guru, and he knows his stuff. And Raj is going to help us to put it. Then we now began to do our peer review. Then we didn't want to be teachers who just have a ceiling. We wanted to continue to grow the number of teachers. So we initiated a grooming exercise for potential teachers all across the region. And in East Africa, we have it happening. In West Africa here, our dear brother Gilbert Kime is doing a great job. They're pulling young, vibrant brothers from all parts of Africa, really, and getting together with them. I think bi-weekly or so, they get together on Saturday morning. They share the scriptures. That is so encouraging. And of course, we began to look at our schools of mission that we have. And MTA, we began to collaborate, bring people to come and teach in our School of Mission. We also are invited to go teach School of Mission. What that has done is to expose, the students and young interns to the best that we have in the continent. One of the very important collaboration work that we've been able to do is just to look at rescue mission. Like I shared, one brother had to go spend 3 months, one of teachers in a church that was, going through some real intense stuff. I'm not going to go into detail because they are very sensitive. We had 2 situations here in West Africa, both French and English, and we had a situation also in Southern Africa, and we had to rally together. We looked at papers, that individuals have written and groups. We looked at how to best, handle this thing, because the world is a global village. If you don't take care of something happening at one point, soon it might be your own time. Finally, we decided to look at tackling some key issues that we all believe that we all share in common on the continent of Africa. We came up with 4 topics, and we divided ourselves into 4 groups, and each group is to go study out and write up a paper. And God willing, the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to start having the first drafts of that paper. There is already communicate going around, and there is a lot of inputs being sought across the continent. The first one is on marriage, divorce, and remarriage. It's something that is staring us in the face, all over Africa at this time. What do we do? How do we approach this? The second one is the role of women. Africa is a huge, continent. Some countries are very matriarchal, leading in their, society. Women have very incredible responsibilities there. Some and also, how do we merge this thing? The perspectives in light of the scriptures. Another group that we formed, which I'm part of, is a group that is looking at the African question. So much question about angels, demons, witchcraft, divination, ancestral curses. These are major things in Africa. So rather than just tackling them locally, we are bringing all our expertise together, and it's been incredible. We have brothers from all across Africa being in one thing, and it actually has been able to help our unity and everything. Finally, we're looking at how the church can remain relevant in every corner of Africa. Even as we grow, as we baptize young disciples, we want to continue to be a movement. We want to continue to be able to reach the next generation. So that's why we have another group that is working on this Christ and culture kind of paper, and that paper will be ready very soon. So it's been great. This is what I want to leave with us before I invite my dear brother, Paul. There are some lessons, for church building teachers that I feel that we might want to learn. Number one, we need to strive for unity. And if you notice, everything that I've been sharing has been based on unity, not conformity. A lot of time in our DNA, we kind of treat people who are not like us. We treat them differently. We treat them in an awkward way. But we need to look for biblical unity. Number two is to commit to continuous spiritual and academic growth. As teachers, we are committed ourselves that we are going to grow. Some of us have already had PhDs, in secular this thing. But in terms of the Bible, many of us have taken master's degree courses. Some of us have finished. I have finished. For example, I'm working on my PhD at this time on biblical Christian apologetics, and we have other brothers who are doing so much. Some of them have taken liking to the biblical languages. So we need to encourage this. We need to teach publicly and privately. Teachers must be committed to teaching. It's very important. If you're going to become teachers who are also part of church building, we need to recognize the work and work closely with the tripartite group that we have, the evangelists and elders. We don't want a repeat of our DNA where people will think teachers only work on the fringes and they are not at the center. Amongst us, all of us here in the African Teachers Group, we all lead Bible discussion. We are involved in discipling people. Many of us are regional leaders, block leaders, big church leaders, zone leaders, special ministry leaders. So we are not just in the academics. We are also part of church building. So when we speak, we are not speaking as somebody who is just an observer, looking to tell people who are doing things what they are not doing right. But we are also parts. We are in the trenches and we are helping build the church. So we don't be relegated as a teacher, to just firefighting. In our DNA, it does seem like teachers have been relegated to just firefighting, go quench that fire, go quench that fire. But we have to also be part of church in building. Many of us, before we are teachers, we are first evangelists, and so we know the nitty-gritty of ministry. I would like to encourage that will be active in church building at various levels, like I've shared. Be involved in church building at various levels. We need to be able to respond, be responsible, knowing that our role is the only one that God says we are going to be judged more than any other person. So we have to be strong and courageous. We're not there, to just rubber stamp things. We have to make sure that if we see, something wrong, we speak up. And of course, we can't be territorial. Let's learn to spread our wings. Let's go and see what people are doing. Just like we are learning here, and I'm sure all of you are doing there all over the world, so that we can know where we are wrong. Where we need to work hard. Things that that we need to learn. Finally, never forget to call each other higher. To life and faith. We cannot be the teachers if we're not calling each other to life and faith. We call each other higher in our family life, in our parenting, in loving our wives, in everything, so that we're not just teachers. Just like Romans says, those who teach must also teach themselves. That's as far as I'm going to go at this time. And I'm going to ask my brother and dear friend and colleague, Paul Smith, to take us in the second half And I believe Paul will be ready to answer all your questions. Let's have a great conference from us here in Africa, from Lagos, Nigeria. And on behalf of all the other 14 teachers, we say a very big thank you for pulling us in. God bless you all. Bye.
Amen. It really is such a privilege to be here. I cannot express my incredible gratitude and appreciation and just how humbling this experience is to be able to be granted this opportunity here. And so thank you so much to Andy, Mati, and the whole team that's invited Africa. Who are we? That's honestly how we felt, to be able to come and share our story, and yet we want to glorify God. We want to honor Him and the work that He has been doing here. We're going to transition a little bit here because in Africa we do believe in teaching the Bible, and so we're going to move on here to just a passage out of 1st and 2nd Chronicles that I believe highlights what it is that I want to share here just briefly in the next couple of minutes. Okay, so just a bit of a historical context. 1st and 2nd Chronicles, they chronicle the story of Israel and Judah, beginning with Adam and ending with the return of the Jewish exiles from Babylon in 538 BCE. And Chronicles creatively reworks its sources to emphasize the importance of the temple, the priesthood, King David, and later faithful kings of David's line. It also omits a lot of David's sin and stuff that he got up to in his life, but that's another conversation for a different day. And the narrative of 1st and 2nd Chronicles can be divided into 3 major sections. The first section, 1st Chronicles 1 through 9, includes genealogies and information about people and groups listed in those genealogies. The second section, which straddles both books from 1st Chronicles 10 through 2nd Chronicles chapter 9, addresses the united monarchy under David and Solomon. The third major section of Chronicles in 2nd Chronicles 10 through 36 focuses on the kings of Judah, the southern kingdom, during the divided monarchy. And then starting with 1st Chronicles chapter 22, the book focuses on David's preparations for the Jerusalem temple. And it's incredible. We see his instructions to his son Solomon for building it, his organization of the priests and the musicians, his directions about temple worship and sacrifice. And then we get to 1st Chronicles chapter 29, verse 10 through 20. And we're going to spend a little bit of time in the text here. 1st Chronicles 29:10 reads, David praised the Lord in the presence of the whole assembly, saying, Praise be to you, Lord, the God of our father Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor, for everything in heaven and earth is yours. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all. Wealth and honor come from you. You are the ruler of all things, and in your hands are strength and power to exalt and give strength to all. Now, our God, we give you thanks and praise your glorious name. This is an incredible time where David is gathered there with all of Israel. And he has this prayer. He's just described how much he is personally sacrificed and given to the building of this temple, which he himself will not even see. His son Solomon will be responsible for it. And if you look closer at verses 10 through 17, we have a beautiful literary device called a chiasm. And in the Hebrew text, it really highlights something key that the writer is trying to get across. And it's an idea that's presented and then subsequently repeated or inverted in a symmetrical mirror-like structure. And although commonly used in poetry, music, lyrics, and children's literature, chiasmus is also seen throughout the Bible to clarify and emphasize key ideas or themes. You guys got to see this. This is such a cool thought here. So if you break down 1 Chronicles 29:10b through 13, the writer is specifically going after one central idea. Verse 10b, praise be to you, Lord, is mirrored in verse 13. We give you thanks and praise your glorious name. And then the next verses 11 and 12, mirror each other as well. Yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory. Verse 12, wealth and honor come from you. You are the ruler of all things. And so you've got this chiastic structure working toward the central theme in this text. And what does it say? Yours, Lord, here's the key thought, the key idea, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all. What is the writer trying to emphasize here? God is head. He is ultimate ruler, and he is exalted above all. So easy to forget that, hey? Yours, Lord, is the kingdom. You know, in the chronicler's view, David's dynasty is closely associated with the kingdom of God. We see that in 1 Chronicles 28, verse 5, and then 29, verse 23, and as well as in 2 Chronicles 13, verse 8. And this connection is unique to 1 and 2 Chronicles in the Old Testament. In the second part of this passage, he says, you are exalted as head over all. You know, the Hebrew word here is rosh or rosh, and literally means head, but it's often used to designate first or primary or chief. And here it indicates that God is exalted as the ultimate ruler of his kingdom and his creation. I begin here because this is where it starts. This is who we are serving. This is who we are obligating ourselves as slaves and servants to. And we have to start with that right heart and perspective. And I want you to see how this passage is saturated with the heart of David. But who am I? And who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? Everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your hand. We are foreigners and strangers in your sight, as were all our ancestors. Our days on earth are like a shadow without hope. Lord our God, all this abundance that we have provided for building you a temple, for your holy name comes from your hand, and all of it belongs to you. I know, my God, that you test the heart and are pleased with integrity. All these things I have given willingly and with honest intent, and I have seen with joy how willingly your people who are here have given to you. Lord, the God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, keep these desires and thoughts in the hearts of your people forever, and keep their hearts loyal to you. And give my son Solomon the wholehearted devotion to keep your commands, statutes, and decrees, and to do everything to build the palatial structure for which I have provided. Then David said to the whole assembly, praise the Lord your God. So they all praised the Lord, the God of their fathers. They bowed down, prostrating themselves before the Lord and the king. What an incredible prayer. You know, it's the passage that reflects David's public prayer of thanksgiving to God as a result of the sacrificial giving of the people towards the temple. His prayer is saturated with heartfelt gratitude, humility, a clear understanding of who he and Israel was before God. And there is an absolute awe and reverence for who he is. You see, David had the right heart orientation and perspective toward kingdom work. Gratitude, humility, awe of who God is. You know, God's indescribable majesty, his glory, his wealth and power and wisdom produced in David what? A deep humility, a profound gratitude for the opportunity to partner with God on this great project, and of course, an awe and reverence for him. And I believe this serves as an amazing example for all of us here today. You know, you compare Solomon's temple, and I had the privilege of being invited onto a Bible study tour with Douglas Jacoby 2 years ago, and I got to stand, you know, at the ruins of the temple. And, you know, you try and picture the size of this monstrosity, and and just how incredible it is. All of that heart, all of that sacrifice for a structure that no longer exists. But it serves as an antitype to what it is that you and I are a part of today. Look at this in Ephesians 2, and it's a beautiful image that Paul has of this temple that's now foreshadowed the church that he's so laboring hard to build up. Consequently, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and also members of his household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets with Christ Jesus himself as the chief cornerstone. In him, the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. Can you see the imagery? And in him, you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. You contrast the first temple, Solomon's temple, to God's church here that continues to be built. Which one is greater? Which one is more glorious? Which one should we feel more privileged to partner with God on? It should fill us with a deep sense of humility and awe for who God is. Who are we that he would allow us along this, into this magnificent building project of the teaching ministry and his church and our role in the church? Our heart and attitude should surpass that of David's. God has allowed us to partner with him in the greatest construction effort of all time. It all starts and ends with right heart and right orientation toward what we're called to do. I really appreciate what Andy shared, servant and slave. But what produces us, what produces that heart in us? It's a right perspective of who God is and what he continues to do in us and what he wants to do with our lives. In Africa, we have this word called Ubuntu. And the word Ubuntu is part of the Zulu phrase Umuntu, Gumuntu, Ngabantu. Now try and say that fast, Umuntu, Gumuntu, Gabantu, okay? Which literally means that a person is a person through other people. That's what it means, okay? And to illustrate this concept, this idea, an anthropologist proposed a game to children of an African tribe. And he put a basket of fruit near a tree and told the kids that the first one to reach the fruit would win them all. When he told them to run, they all took each other's hands and ran together, then sat together and enjoyed the fruits. When asked why they ran like that, as one could have taken all the fruit for oneself, they said, Ubuntu. How can one of us be happy if all the others are sad? Ubuntu is a philosophy of African tribes that can be summed up as, I am because we are. That is the heart behind Ubuntu. Ubuntu in the African teachers team is, we are because of who you are. We are intrinsically connected in this divine building project of the teaching ministry across God's kingdom. The African teachers team wouldn't exist today if it wasn't for the investment of some very special individuals over the decades. Just want to make sure I'm keeping up here with my slides. We are so incredibly grateful just for the investment. I know Steve Kennard mentioned 2 to 3 years as a result of the Beam Foundation. That's not what it took. It's taken decades for the African teachers group to arrive where we're at, and we're by no means where we need to be. We exist because of the incredible investment that others have made in us over the decades. Dr. Steve Kennard, Dr. Douglas Jacoby, Dave Proctor, Michael Burns, John Oakes, Joey Harris, the list goes on. Men and women who have sacrificed time, energy, and money and resources to contribute toward our training, a minimum of 2 decades. You know, I have to say, though, that we have had a bit of a head start culturally. And I wanted to highlight this because I believe it has a direct bearing on your particular context. And so let's talk a little bit about individualistic versus collectivistic cultures and how that impacts on team. You know, individualism is mostly seen in the cultures of Western Europe and North America, whereas collectivism is mostly seen in the cultures of Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe and Latin America. Collectivism puts an emphasis on distinguishing between in-groups and out-groups, engaging in cooperative tasks, and focusing on what people have in common. Conversely, individualism is characterized by the engagement in competitive tasks, by public situations, and by an emphasis on what makes the individual distinct. Collectivistic societies value family, cohesion, cooperation, solidarity, and conformity. And thus, people in these societies tend to make more references to others, emphasize group goals, and follow the expectations and regulations of the group. We all have a context. You know, and as the African continent is more westernized, we've seen this individualism, both positively and negatively, impact the way that we approach ministry. You know, in Africa, though, we come from a very collectivistic society where I am because of who you are. And that's what's most important. Now, I have to say this. Irrespective of an individualistic culture that you might come from or collectivistic culture, what's so important is Christian culture and kingdom culture. Andy stole my scripture that I was going to share here this morning in his message, but you know, the Spirit here is emphasizing something. Philippians 2, verse 1 through 5, a passage that we are very familiar with. If you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others, and your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. Christian culture supersedes individualistic societies and collectivistic societies and gives us a goal to work toward. The teaching ministry is not my ministry. It's not Marty's ministry or Andy's ministry or anyone else's ministry as an individual. It's our ministry. I am because of who you are. And that's what's most important. Yes, we've got these areas of Eurasia and the Middle East and all these different places, but together we are one. And how can we constructively cooperate to build the teaching ministry up, not just in your hometown, but across the globe? And that has to be the question. You know, so I want to close here just with some tangibles that might help your continuing efforts to build a Christ-centered teams. I'm sure by now you've realized that we place a huge emphasis on respect of identity and celebration of diversity in our African team. But what has helped us is firstly, self-awareness, a growing in self-awareness, which is to develop a sober assessment of your individual strengths and weaknesses. Romans 12 verse 3 says, because of the privilege and authority God has given me, I give each of you this warning. Don't think you're better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourself, measuring yourselves by the faith God has given of us. So how we developed self-awareness in our group, and remember, this is ongoing. A project that emphasized this, Emmanuel mentioned it, was developing our teacher profiles. So all 15 of us, we had to develop a profile. I'd never put together a profile or a resume in the ministry before, and just that exercise alone was so good for our humility. And as we read one another's profiles as a team, we could recognize, okay, this is where this guy's strengths and skill sets lie. I don't know him from a bar of soap. We haven't met together, all 15 of us, since we came together. It's been all virtually. But it's amazing, there's a brotherhood that develops, a close bond and unity because we've upped our game when it's come to self-awareness. I'm not going to step into an arena that I know I'm not strong in, but I'm going to humbly offer what it is that God has put inside me and say, here we go, this is what I have to contribute toward the table. Secondly, group awareness. I cannot highlight this more and more to forging unity in your teachers' team. Choose to value others above yourselves. And this helps you see others' strengths more readily. Philippians 2:3, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility. Value others above yourself. And a project that really helped us emphasize this was the ATG Diary of 2020. These weren't just cool projects that we decided upon. These were projects to test every single one of our hearts and to grow in our self-awareness and group awareness as a team. And so we put together this diary. Emmanuel is an incredible editor, colorful. He's got many gifts, and this document turned into 80 documents. But just sitting there and reading about what East Africa is doing and West Africa is doing and the Central African, not only does it foster a sense of unity and purpose, but group awareness. And it's opened up exponential opportunity for us to invite these guys into town. There is a connectedness and a cohesion across the African teachers group that is sweet. It's a brotherhood because we value one another above ourselves. I thought of 14 other brothers that could have been standing here ahead of me today. And I feel very humbled and privileged to be able to just share what God continues to do. Last and not least, keep the main thing the main thing. Glorification of Christ in whatever project or task we are partnering on. And we got some big fish in the frying pan if you see those projects. We're trying to contextualize a lot of what the Global Teachers Service team has done for our African context. You might not struggle with angels, demons, and witchcraft in your part of the world, except Dave Hooper maybe, but those are real issues for us. The role of the woman in an African context, you walking on hot coals, baby. We live in a very patriarchal society, and that varies across the continent. And how do we navigate that complex issue within an African context? So it's going to require unity and humility. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share, to be here. Andy, Marty, we are grateful and humbled. Thank you so much.
Is this on? No. Now it is. Okay, we've now got a few moments just to have some question and answers, and it's open also online, but we only have one question online so far that showed up. So let's just go ahead, and we're really focusing in on the African story in this question and answer period. So Paul is now representing not just 3 people, we understand 15 people, and in fact, a lot more people than that. So please just go ahead and ask your questions, and we can take this microphone. Thank the delivery.
That was really impressive, inspiring. A lot of things. I've been in contact with certain of the guys in Africa and know that it seems like it's gone from being a challenge to be united to being a super strength. And I'm just curious, could you tell us a little bit about what was the motor behind all this work that you guys have done? What sparked the thing off, and give us some inspiration to imitate you guys?
The Spirit of God. The Spirit moved in a powerful way. We obviously heard about Dr. Steve Kennard's efforts, with French West Africa Central, but it's been decades worth of investment. I've lost count how many times, Douglas has been on the continent, and Dave giving up years. And so the Spirit has moved through men and women to raise up, train. And I think if there's any spark or drive, it's the Spirit. I mean, I'm energized. We're ready to go. And I believe we're electrified because of what God continues to do in us and through us. So I wish it was a more sophisticated answer than that, brother. But I think a lot of prayer. I've personally dreamed of an African teachers ministry for over 2 decades. And we have labored in prayer. We've put it before God. We've prayed.
Other questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your emphasis on the community aspect and the doing things as a community. How do you manage the tension between the desire for that sense of community and mutual submission and avoid the tendency to conformity, which we have tended to see? We want to be willing to go along, to get along, but how do you manage that tension?
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe an appropriate response is yes. No, look, again, I think with great humility, all of us, as Emmanuel mentioned, are involved in ministering capacity. So my wife and I actually look after a region in the Joburg church, and so we're on the ground doing ministry, and that's definitely a uniting factor, is that we have a collective responsibility to the church. We're not just these armchair theologians, although I do believe there's place for that to be able to think, research, but we're on the ground. And I think there's a unifying strength in that irrespective of whatever opinion we might have on a particular matter, at the end of the day, the overwhelming responsibility we feel is to God and to His church to build it up. And so in the last 2 years, we've had to navigate little conflict within our African teachers group. I'm not saying it hasn't been there, but I think if we didn't start with unity and cooperation and a right heart orientation toward Christ and what He's called us to do, I think it would have dismantled very quickly. And so I think every member on this group has an awareness of Christ and an incredible privilege, responsibility to Christ first before we engage with one another. And Jesus has been the unifying factor between all of us.
We're going to take one of the questions from online right now. Do you have sisters involved in the teaching ministry in African churches in any way?
Absolutely, and that is probably like the rest of the world, a hot topic of conversation right now. We had 3 sisters graduate at the top of our ministry training academy in Southern Africa. And so my conversation all along has been, well, when can we include them? When can we include them? And so we've kind of gotten together, we've pulled together our team, and I'm talking specifically for Southern Africa now. But we've got 2-3 sisters in the wings that are joining us for our first meeting when I get back. And these are women that have served in the ministry for decades that we respect tremendously. And so, yes, there's an active women's training program that is starting to get up and running in Southern Africa, which we're very excited about.
Paul, great presentation also, Emmanuel. Really inspiring. You prayed for 20 years. What's your vision for what will it look like in 20 years in Africa?
That's a great question, Valdo. More and more teachers raising up. And not only men, but combined women and men teachers teams, next-gen teams. And so we've already developed a development program for teachers within our regions that is a work in progress. It's that all 5 families of churches have agreed upon within our teachers team that, listen, this is a priority. And so we want to see in every single congregation across Africa at least a qualified teacher staffed and equipped to be able to serve in every single one of those congregations. And that's a big task. Southern Africa alone, 23 churches. We want a teacher in every single one of those churches, building and strengthening and developing the teaching ministry within the next 10 to 15 years.
We'll take another question from online. Do you have relationships or conversations with mainline churches of Christ in Africa?
We do, and look, I think given my personal history, very prejudiced toward the mainline churches of Christ, Christian churches, anything outside of our churches up until maybe 10 years ago. Last year's conference in San Antonio was an eye-opener for me. We had these amazing brothers come on forward and really critique the ICOC in a good way. And to be able to hear from Everett Hufford and Doug Foster and just these incredible men in humility, in great humility, critiquing the ICOC in a collaborative, we want to help type of spirit was so refreshing. And so, yes, I mean, even when my wife and I had an opportunity to serve the church in Cape Town for a couple of years, there are several mainstream churches of Christ there, and we had dialogue, we had conversations. And so I think what I love about the teaching ministry, and particularly academia, it opens up those doors for that type of conversation. And so I'm very excited about that.
Another question. How do you manage having both roles of evangelist and teacher?
With great difficulty. It's a good and necessary tension that I have to personally navigate. My day job, just like Dr. Steve Kennard, is to oversee a region in the Joburg Church, and so to keep it moving forward. And what are we doing to mobilize our group? But at the same time, to learn the wisdom that as much as we're going forward, we're going deep, and that we're maturing. And so it's a tension that I haven't figured out and that I continue to try and navigate. So sometimes I err on the side of the evangelist comes out of me and is like, man, we got to get out there, we got to do this. And then the teacher side of me is, man, we got to teach. We got to mature the church, we got to grow faith. So it is a necessary tension that I constantly navigate, you know. So.
Great. Some other questions from the hall?
Amen.
Okay, we'll go back to the online. Do you have any cases in Africa where our church united with another Christian church?
That's a good question, and I know we've got a bunch of the teachers team online, so maybe they can present it. But I don't. You're talking about a reconstruction,
I'm just reading a question.
not that I'm aware of. I cannot think of anything off the top of my head. No.
Then one more question. When setting up this wonderful team, how did you deal with not stepping on toes from old or existing teaching ministries?
Well, what's funny is there wasn't an old or existing teaching ministry on the continent. You know, our examples were US-based teachers that would come in periodically, so we didn't have a teaching ministry. And so, you know, it's always harder to go first. So we're the first. Maybe the next generation of teachers will be able to answer that question better and critique us and what it is that they think we should have and could have done differently.
Watch your toes, brother. Okay. Any other questions from the hall? Okay.
Yeah, Paul, thank you. That's really incredible what you have done so far. My question is, do you have somehow any platform where you provide information or documents or whatever for the church?
We do, and remember, Africa is divided into 5 families of churches, and you've got anywhere from 20 to 30 to 50 churches in each family. And so, I know for Southern Africa, for instance, we've started up a YouTube channel, SA Teachers YouTube channel. We've also, a lot of videos developed through COVID lockdown, and we've also, it's mainly accessible at the moment just for the teachers, but we've compiled a huge memory bank of papers that we've written or papers that we reference on particular topics. And so I know that the East African guys, and particularly the West African guys, have done the same. But you raise a good point. Maybe we need to advertise that and say, hey, here's this material available. You know, we, as part of our training program, the Southern African Brothers wrote a paper on the role of teacher, evangelist, and elder, and what that cooperation should look like. And I got some great critique from Dave Proctor that we need to raise the standard to more of a scholastic perspective. But Steve is like, man, we want to put this on the world stage. So we feel very humbled, that we've written this document, because we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we relate to the evangelists and elders teams? What is our role in our appointments and figuring that out? And so we wrote a paper on it, and so it's still undergoing revision. But yes, we do have materials available, and that we'd love to share. We'd love to see some of your stuff. We'd love to, and I think that's where collaboration exists. Imagine a teacher's team across Eurasia with their own profiles and resources and documents, and that probably exists already, but to be able to relate and connect like that would be awesome.
It doesn't exist already, and we're praying for that to exist. Okay. Another online question. What has been the most helpful as teaching about race in the African perspective?
What is the most helpful teaching about race in Africa?
What is the most helpful in teaching, I guess, about race in the African?
Okay. Africa is a melting pot of varying cultures. So I'm African, but of European descent. A lot of my British brothers over there. My mother came across on the boat when she was 8, but I'm South African. I speak 4 different languages, 2 of them not as well as the first 2, but it is a melting pot of varying races and cultures. You cannot step onto the continent of Africa without a listening ear, willing to learn and respecting the person, like you, or who is not like you. And so what has helped with race relations? A deep sense of humility and Christ-centered conversations. We have more in common as brothers and sisters than we do outside of that. And so that's where we start. That is our starting point and ending point when it comes to that conversation.
Very important question. Has Steve Kennard been made a chief? Just thought I'd throw that out there. Okay, what kind of situations in a church require involving teachers and cannot be effectively solved within a house church? So when do you call in the teachers?
Well, that's a great question. I think that's situational to the specific context of wherever that might be taking place. But Emmanuel had a great response. So often, and again, I don't know what it's been like in your neck of the woods, but teachers have often been called in the crisis stage. So now we're firefighters. We've got this issue of, pick a topic, women deacons, or pick a topic. And so it would be great to not see it escalate to that point, but instead to create this community-type learning where it's, in a house church, I don't have all the answers. Let's study it out together. Let's have a cooperative spirit of humility and unity, and let's investigate it. Now, after that process of investigation and everyone comes forward and presents their perspective, and there's still disunity, then I'd say that's a good time to be able to involve the teacher.
I love that answer. Any more questions from the... Go ahead.
At the beginning, Steve mentioned this working with the church leaders, and was there a need to convince evangelists that teachers had something to bring to the table and needed to be a valuable part of the team?
That's a great question. Look, I can't speak much for my brothers in West and East Africa. In Southern Africa, no. The desire to see teachers appointed, to their specific role in a Southern African context has been there for a while. When Dave Proctor came to Johannesburg, and again, I have such tremendous appreciation and respect for Dave because he, in many respects, shifted the culture around ministry role and perspective in Joburg in particular. And it was such a great inspiration for the teaching ministry. He himself was appointed a congregational teacher, and that paved the way. Around about that time, Mike Burns was making an annual trip. He was having conversations. And so, particularly with the Rentons and our senior leadership team, it required minimal persuasion for these teachers to be recognized. The question of who should be recognized was a different conversation. And so, yeah, that's certainly how it went down in Southern Africa. I can't speak for West or East Africa.
Any other questions in the hall? Okay.
How do you deal with the wrestling of the heart? I mean, teaching is basically molding a heart. And how do you deal with that in a digital paper form? Like teaching never stands alone as a academic, in the academic realm. It stands in a heart, in a wrestling with a heart. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
How to deal with that in, yeah.
Again, I hope I understand your question, and just, you know, if I don't answer it, please rephrase it maybe. But I learned early on that if people are not learning, you're not teaching. So, you know, there's no point in me coming up and presenting something that is going completely over the heads of the majority of the audience. A good teacher, again, what I've learned, and again, a master cannot be above his teacher. You know, a good teacher is able to assess the context of his situation, look at the audience, and develop that material accordingly. And so I hope that helps, you know, but I think, again, I think it's also gift set. Certain teachers are gifted more toward an academic presentation. Others, particularly within our families of churches, most of us were evangelists first before we were teachers. So we were trained in presentation and dealing with heart and all of that before we had to present more deeper stuff or doctrinal stuff. Does that answer your question? I don't know if it hits the spot.
I'm more talking about the idea of having teaching videos, which are like if you have paper and videos that are just online, downloadable, the audience is random. You don't have the access to the heart.
Yeah.
You don't know who you're molding.
Yes.
How do you deal with that in your approaches?
Well, that's great. Look, again, a lot of prayer. And we obviously cannot control the outcome of who's watching our videos and when, but I think we see a specific need and we're trying to address it. You know, when COVID hit the shores of Southern Africa, the teachers team stepped onto the platform very quickly, and we had to deal with a lot of doctrinal issues, theological issues, as well as anxiety around this. You know, where is God in all of this? Why is God allowing this to happen? And so we created, for instance, a series of videos, 5 to 7 videos, 15 to 20 minutes each, dealing with 7 of these key issues. And so needs-orientated often dictates content. And so that's how we've navigated the last 2 years together. Man, what's a need? And let's teach on that, you know. And so, and our particular team is also gifted. We've got a brother, Raj Chandra, and he is just gifted at next-gen communication. And I'm constantly, Raj, what do you think, man? You know, I'm 20 years into the ministry. I need to constantly grow in how I'm communicating to the next gen. What do you think? And so that also plays a role in terms of gift-based opportunity.
You know, I want to address a little something you said there, Walter. Just what I hear the theme running through Steve's emphasis today and the whole African story is community teaching. What's interesting is we still project our individualism onto it. And so I'm going to search the internet. I'm going to listen to videos by myself. And I'm going to be the individual receiver of this. And I think the answer to your question is that we learn how to encourage people to receive things as groups. In other words, sit down with a friend and listen to this, to discuss it, to make sure it penetrates to the heart. We're going to need some discussion. You need some relationship. But we like to be in control. I mean, I'm talking about myself. I like to do my study. I like to see what I'm looking at. And sadly, then I can also say I like to control what's going to go into my heart. Whereas someone else, like my wife, might say, Andy, you might want to listen to that a little more. Whereas I'm going, no, that's painful. I don't want to listen to that more. So, you know, that group teaching is also group learning. And I just hits me very deeply in listening to everything we've heard these last couple of days. Any other questions from the hall?
Thank you, Paul, so much. As you understand, we are mostly teachers, or people want to be teachers in Europe. And we are just in the process to start having European teaching ministry or something like that. With your experience and what you have seen, what will be kind of some aspects to pay attention to, or some good tips or ideas?
Amen. Feel humbled by that question, Trent. I mean, have tremendous respect for you and Kaido and your work here. But, you know, with all of these appointments, we, as Africans, we're very communal. Let's get together and let's talk, and preferably that's around food, okay? And so, you know, I think the best starting place is get everyone online in the same room. And the exercise of writing up our profiles or resumes, as Emmanuel describes it, was for our benefit. It wasn't so that we could showcase to the world and say, hey, wow, look at the African teachers team. No, it was, man, who is my brother in East Africa? And so maybe a good starting point is developing some teacher profiles for your particular geographical area, and just starting to meet regularly. We had no agenda initially when we got together as an African teachers group. We just wanted to meet, connect, get to know my brother a bit, and I think coming into that context and setting without an agenda, without a territorial drive that, you know, this is my teaching ministry or my particular family of churches, but just a desire to connect as brother and sister is I think, a crucial starting point. You know, we're brothers and sisters first before we are teachers or whatever particular role has called us to. You know, and then also secondly, coming together on some collaborative projects. Those 4 projects we decided upon went through a massive vetting process. We had to narrow that down from 30 things, and we got everyone's suggestion, guys, what are the hot topics or issues in your particular family of churches? And we went through a vetting process over weeks, months, to nail it down to those 4 before we assigned the task teams. But that process was very unifying because it focused us and it pulled us together, and now we've got these task teams orientated toward marriage, divorce, remarriage in an African context, women in an African context, and it unites us when we're working on a project together.
Great. Let's just show our appreciation for Paul and for the African Teacher Service Team.